G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the less knowns and the players who are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Heff, and joining me on the podcast this week, you've heard his voice before, it's my good mate Zanks. How you going, mate?
Heff, amazing to be back again. It's great to hook up, even if it's online, all the way from Melbourne. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I think last year when you were on the show, I actually came over and we recorded it in your spare bedroom. It's a bit different this time.
Yeah, just a little bit different. I mean, it's not quite the setup that you have in Studio Heff over there, just looking at the TV you've got in the background and on all that kind of stuff. It is an amazing setup you've got there.
It is a nice little setup. We are actually recording another podcast in Studio Heff these days, so it's a bit weird if it just looks like Keeper League paraphernalia and everything behind me when we're recording that other podcast.
You've just come a long, long way.
We'll hopefully get a few more clients. Could plug that right now. If anyone wants me to record their podcast, hit me up. But anyway, how have you been going, mate? How's the team at AFL Stats, mate, going? How's all that?
Oh, the team's busy at work again this off season. All hands are on deck at the moment. But no, last year was a bit of a quiet year, getting married and having things like honeymoons and all that kind of stuff really took out a bit of time. But over the next month or so, trying to be able to re-engage again, so it should be great.
Damn, life getting important when in the way of the important stuff like AFL fantasy. I get it, mate. I get it.
How did we survive as kids? Hey?
Yeah, no idea. Well, on the more important stuff then, I guess. So, how's your Keeper League team looking in the off season? What's the go with the former captains club? How's that all looking?
Oh, we're going okay. I think it's another rebuild, so I'm only 2 years away from being 2 years away, which is the constant. We had our home league. We had our punting challenge over the weekend. Some interesting results, only a couple of punts getting up, so watching a couple of teams go ahead in the draft league and watching the guy who did have the number one pick slip down to 3, which was pretty funny at the same time.
Yeah, that's the worst. That happened to me the year I finished bottom. I think I slipped down to pick 5. So it could be worse is what I'm trying to say to Fossil there.
But the two blokes who have jumped ahead of him, who knows what they're going to pick? There's talk in the group chat, that Jaeger might slip to 7th or 8th. Do you think that's a chance?
Look, I think there's more than a chance of that happening. If someone might pick up Jaeger in the first round, who knows? Wait, you talking about Jaeger O'Meara or Jagger Smith?
Jagger Smith.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't think Jagger's going to get past pick 1 somehow. I don't think as silly as our top picks could be, I don't think he's going to slip that far. But anyway, what are your big decisions with your team? Have you got your keepers set up? Is there any tough listings that you're going to have to make? What's the go?
No, when your team's as bad as mine, you're just trying to keep as many of the even fantasy relevant players that you can. So, it's definitely got better last year with a couple of change in rules. So my first 2 draft picks last year were definitely keepers, the likes of Jeremy Cameron and another other solid midfielder. So it's getting better slowly but surely. It's just a matter of if we can all band together and stop that one guy who shall stay nameless, and let's just not let him win again this year.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good plan. But anyways, before we get into the show, we've migrated our league over to the Keeper platform this season. How have you been finding it, Zanks? You've been having to play around and...
Yeah, it's really awesome. So I'm a commissioner in another league as well, and just being able to, it feels so easy to move and manipulate a few of the different rules around and set things up to communicate. I think that the charter itself, I'm not sure how you liked that. It's basically where you set the rules, just having everything all in the one spot and having to not worry about living everything in Excel or a Google sheet it's a massive win, and I think the guys and the team and yourself have done an amazing job in setting it up and getting it out to the community.
I think my favourite part is what I found this week is trying to throw out some trade offers and just it used to be such a chore to trade draft picks, have to go to the spreadsheet, see what's available. Then when you actually come up with a deal, email the commissioner, make sure he logs it down, all that sort of stuff. Whereas now it's just go in, click, trade draft pick, offer this player for a draft pick, and the way you go.
And also, if you trade 1 to 2, our other league trades 2 years in advance, just being able to go, well, it's all logged in the same place. It didn't have to be taken out of the chat, put into another spreadsheet and another spreadsheet. So it really makes it easier to understand exactly what you got ahead of you and what the things you sort of need to be able to take on as a coach as well.
All right, in this week's episode, we're actually going to talk about the keeper league worthy rucks. That is the breakout contenders, the undervalued players, the stash options, and some of the senior players that might be, you might be looking to trade out of your team or bring in if you're contending for a flag. Last year, I think both of you were pretty much in need of a ruck for both of our teams. You passed on Tristan Cherry in the first round. Is that correct?
Yeah, it took a midfielder, so I don't think even the great Heff probably wasn't picking that Cherry was quite going to hit the peaks that he did last year. I think there's one or two blokes in that we'll talk about in the chat. They have a similar type of mindset where they have shown something that they have got. They can be a fantasy ruckman, but the game style that North really gave them last year really was the multiplier and allowed them to really push ahead with his score so significantly.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. My key point was: do you think the rucks are probably one of the more valuable positions in AFL fantasy these days? You look at the top scorers in the league. You know, your Rowan Marshalls, your Tristan Cherries, your Max Gorns. They're right up there, and they're the ones scoring 110 plus. These averaging 110 plus, where the midfielders kind of aren't quite getting there these days. Do you think the ruck's taken over as one of the most important spots to have on your field?
Oh, absolutely, especially if you're getting that. For probably two areas. One is if you're getting the absolute top of the tree, if you're getting a Cherry who's you're using as captain and being able to double that score every week, but also if you're finding some real late diamonds in the rough as well, which can sort of look if you are playing now that we're back in on the keeper platform, which does have the utility platforms, position as well. I think it really gives huge amounts of value if you can find one of those up-and-coming rucks to fill in that area, not just to play just in that one ruck position, which was a little bit less valued a couple of years ago.
Yeah, 100% agree. Well, we will get into some up-and-coming rucks in the show in just a sec. But first, I want to throw to an interview I did late last week with another up-and-coming ruck in the AFL, and that's Jordon Sweet. He was good enough to give up some of his time to actually come into the studio, and we'll take a listen to that now. All right, listeners, this podcast is obviously about the keeper league worthy rucks, the undervalued guys, and the breakout potential guys. And on the show today, we have one of the breakout rucks from last season, definitely from a fantasy perspective, Port Adelaide ruckman, Jordon Sweet. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. This is great. Love this.
First and foremost, most important question, do you play fantasy?
I play Supercoach, yeah.
Supercoach?
I sometimes do fantasy, but more so Supercoach.
Is that because you lived in Victoria for a bit, or what's the go?
It's probably because my hit-outs advantage count.
Yeah, fair enough.
Better.
So you count your own stats, do you? You look at them? That's something that you think about?
I don't do it on the field, no. But yeah, I like to, have myself in my team and,
Have you done any draft leagues or keeper leagues or anything like that? Or?
No, I haven't. No, I need to do that though.
Might be something you venture into
jump in
next.
yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll find a spot for you.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll start off talking about your career. So obviously you were behind Tim English at Western Bulldogs. You sought the trade to Port Adelaide, and you were behind Soldo for a little bit there for essentially the first half of the season. What changed, and what do you attribute your success in 2024 to?
Well, I mean, just the opportunity, I guess. I was lucky, I got the opportunity the second half of the year to, play well and try to play well and, hold my spot in that team. So, I guess what did I bring it to? I mean, just being committed to, rocking up and turning up each day and doing my job.
Always important, yeah.
Yeah, always important to rock up to your job, but actually rocking up and, doing my work and, sometime it was just going to click and I hope...
Do you credit anyone specifically that you worked with at Port that's kind of helped you break into the side, or?
I mean, it all starts from the Dogs too. I mean,
true.
Staying behind Timmy.
Yeah.
I mean, Timmy's a great fellow and a really good role model for myself. He was outstanding. He made my game better. He showed me how to cover the ground better, and his skills are great. So you really had to step up and match him. So I feel as if we helped each other get better as footballers, and then I come to Port, and Matthew Loby's been massive for me, and obviously working with Dante now, and Ivan as well. So working with a mix of different people has really helped. And then probably the biggest influence for me in footy was Stephen Martin being. He was a massive,
He's a big fella.
Yeah. And obviously massive in this scheme of things. Keeper league.
He was there for a while.
He was fantasy pig for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
He showed me how to possess the ball more and find the ball around the ground a bit more, and his ruck craft was obviously elite. So He's probably the biggest influence on me.
It's probably good news for the fantasy coaches out there. They've been behind Steph Martin, Tim English, some good fantasy names there to bring you up throughout your career. But anyway, by the end of last season, you were putting up some pretty good fantasy numbers yourself, and you ended up averaging 81 points. So that's a pretty good return for like in a lot of drafts. I think you went really late in our draft.
Right.
You were probably one of the last probably 4 or 5 picks from one of the teams.
Yep.
And he's pretty stoked that he's got you now to get that 80 average by the end of the season. But I guess the thing with AFL Rucks, they kind of score in a few different ways. Like you can either play as like an extra midfielder around the ground, pick up some points. Like Dean Cox was always good at that. Tim English kind of does that a bit as well. And others score by like forcing tackles and repeat stoppages and bringing the ball out of the ruck themselves as well and giving away the handball. Which do you reckon you lend yourself more?
I'm definitely in the second category. I'm going to try and this year I'm going to try and get around the ground more, and I've got a bit more freedom this year to run around and do my own thing this year. So I'm trying to dabble in the first category of what you just said. So
how's the tank going, the running and all that sort of stuff?
I think it's pretty. I'd back myself in my running this year. I feel I'm a lot fitter this year. So
good.
So hopefully my running evolves and gets better and shows on match day. So but yeah, I'd say the second option, what you said, getting the ball out the ruck, tackles, stoppages, hit ups to advantage. That's probably where
all the stuff the fantasy coaches love to hear.
Yeah,
no, that's good. All right, well, moving on to Port Adelaide just generally. Pre-season's in full swing. Obviously, you've just come off the track right now, so we're very thankful to get you in here. But a few listeners want to know who has been the most improved player on the track for Port Adelaide this season.
Wow, most improved. Most improved. I'm going to say Dylan Williams is definitely brought to another level this year.
Yep.
So whether he's an option to cover Dan's spot.
Well, he was a mainstay a couple of years ago, and he was one of the rookies of the year, really, and then fell out of favour last season. But that's probably a name that not many people are throwing up to cover Dan Houston's spot.
Well, we had a few niggles last year with injuries, and so it kind of hurt him. And then I'll just find that he's attacked this preseason really well, and he's done all the right things so far, and whether that leads to him playing more footy, who knows? So he's really impressed me from improvement-wise, but then from the draftees that have come in, they've been outstanding. I mean,
we'll move on to the draftees in a second. So if you're going to back one person in to kind of fill that Dan Houston role, do you think it is a player? Is it a Kane Farrell or something like that kind of gets a few extra points from that? Or do you think it's going to be more like a team covering of the loss of Dan Houston?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know, because we've still got Kane who hasn't trained.
Yeah, I heard he's out
yet. So when he comes back, he could fill the role. Logan Evans, Lockie Jones, Miles Bergman, Dill Williams, Rory Atkins. There's so many names that can go through there.
What's the?
So I think it will be a team. That's what I think. It will be a team approach.
What is the Rats' chances of getting a game? A few people are kind of on the fence.
I like it. I think he's a chance.
Yeah.
I like Rat. He's a great fella. He's brought a really good leadership down back for the guys down back there. So especially in the higher lines, because obviously most of them are pretty young and they see red when they get the ball. So
bit of experience back there helps.
A bit of experience back there may help. So I honestly can see him playing. So
that's the thing. Like there's a few people that think there's just a bit of a, I guess it was a bit of a salary cap dump, but there's quite a few people out there as well like think he has some potential to fit into that halfback line as well. So
certainly,
no, that's good to hear. Well, onto the draftees now. So they're very important in keeper leagues because the younger players are the guy you want.
Yep.
But do you see any of them breaking into the side? And if so, any of them likely to be decent fantasy scorers?
I think there's already talk of one of them potentially playing round one.
So Joe Berry?
That would be Joe Berry, yeah, that's correct. He's been incredible.
Yeah.
The way we play, what we're trying to play this year, it's going to really work well for him. So
I did have some eyes out at training this morning, and they were very impressed with him.
He's lightning quick, runs up and down the ground, covers a lot of ground. So I think he will be pretty good.
What about Christian Moraes? There's a bit of talk about him in the media that he could be someone that slots in as well because he can kind of play a few different roles on the outside a bit. What are your thoughts on him?
I think he'd be on the wing-ish, wing, half forward, maybe half back when he gets a bit older. But he's still got a lot to learn. He's pretty raw still, so he could play this year. I don't know. Won't cap him. I think.
Fair enough. Won't get you to talk about your team lineup too much or give anything away in that regard, but that's good to hear for fantasy coaches out there. Just one last question before I let you go. If you had to draft one of your teammates in a keeper league draft, who would you draft first?
Oh, in a keeper league.
Yeah, you got to be a bit younger.
I mean, all the big dogs are pretty
you can't
young.
really go wrong.
They're pretty young. I mean, like Horny.
Yeah.
Horny's probably the one, I think.
Yeah.
But if you want to go younger than that, I mean...
No, Horn Francis is fine. That's a good
Horny's
pick.
probably got 21, 22,
Yeah, no,
so
that's
isn't
fine.
he? So,
yeah, you got 10 years there.
yeah, I'd say the Horny one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good to hear.
I reckon. It's pretty easy.
I think so. Could say Zach Butters, who is a super coach.
Yeah, what is he, 24 now?
24?
So
He's still got a bit of time there.
Still another 10 years.
Yeah, you got heaps of time there. But yeah.
Connor's 25 yesterday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
So.
It says a lot about the list where we're at with the...
Yeah,
the
I saw
team.
something the other day, actually, where it was like an age demographic. We
Yeah.
had one person who was really old,
Yeah,
obviously being Bokey.
yeah.
I
Brings the average up a bit.
think the next one was like 31.
Yeah, okay. So,
And then after that, it was like 27. So,
well, there's plenty of good keeper league players to store for the future
yeah,
at Port Adelaide.
absolutely.
Anyways, Jordan, thank you so much for giving up your time today coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And yeah, good luck this season.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right, there's the interview with Jordon Sweet. Actually awesome of him to actually, like, I gave him the opportunity to like just do it online because I thought it might be like, a bit weird to come over to just some random dude's house and record a podcast in his spare bedroom / makeshift studio. But he was like, nah, I'm coming over. I'm so keen to check out the studio, that sort of stuff. So, no, absolute legend of a bloke. And thanks heaps to Jordan for coming on the show. Anyways, let's get into the main part of the podcast. We're going to talk about the breakout contenders first. So, for Rucks, it's a bit weird, isn't it, Zanks? Like, Rucks we measure them in different years. Like, usually midfielders, we look at the guys coming into their third or fourth years. Rucks are probably a bit different, aren't they?
I was going to ask you that exact question. You set these preseason podcasts up so well with the breakout contenders and the stash options, but it feels like Rucks are just a completely different type of player because you can have these guys on an AFL list for 5 and 6 years before they even get an opportunity to come out as well. So how do you see the breakout contenders? Is this these guys you want to keep for years and years on your list, or is it all about timing and being able to get in there just as they're looking to come to fruition?
Basically, with Rucks, I reckon 21 is the equivalent, or 25 is the equivalent of 21. We measure them in ruck years,
Yeah, really fair.
So, but the thing is, like, a lot of the Rucks can kind of go on until they're a bit older as well. Like, some do break down with injuries, but in recent history, like, we've seen Max Gawn, who's still performing as well as ever. What's he at, 33, 34 now? Is that correct?
Yeah,
and even Todd 33. And Todd Goldstein, like, up until a year ago, really was still performing okay, given his age as well. So, like, you do get them for a little bit of time as well. I think the way the Rucks kind of play their game, like, they're not like they're obviously bigger bodies and they can get sorer and stuff like that. But a lot of the time as well, they're not kind of running as much as some of the midfielders and stuff like that. So that might, prolong their longevity a bit. I don't know. I'm not a sports scientist. I don't know.
Just have one other question though. Do you see, obviously the ruck rule had a huge change last year.
Yes.
Do you see any other sort of changes that might change the way that you see some of these breakout contenders coming through this year?
No, definitely. Like, in all honesty, I haven't kept up the rules, so I'm not sure if things have changed again. But with that last year, where the Rucks could kind of engage before the ball went up and stuff like that, it really suited those bigger body ruckmen or the Rucks that could actually take the ball out of the ruck and dish off the handballs, because instead of, waiting for a hit out, you're getting +2 each time instead of +1. So there was a few bits and pieces like that. Also, I felt like the handball out of the ruck did kind of cause a stoppage more often as well. So, like, you'd get another tackle or another opportunity.
Stoppage.
Yeah, that kind of stuff as well. So, yeah, it definitely is. Like, these days, back in the day, you were probably looking at like the ruckman who could be the extra midfielder, and that was the way you would approach it. But now you're kind of looking for the bigger guys that can kind of tackle and also take the ball out of the ruck and force that repeat stoppage there. But anyways, let's get onto the list of players. First one I've got here is Ned Moyle, and he proved last year that he's more than just a backup ruckman. He averaged 77.6 overall in 2024, but in solo ruck performances without Jared Witts, he actually averaged 84.3 points per game. And then when you think of the contrast, when he was sharing it with Witts, he only averaged 31. So when he's the number one ruck, he can definitely hold his own. It's just like, what do you see happening this year? And he's someone you should be targeting now, knowing that Witts is getting to the twilight of his career, or do you think it's just a bit of a waste?
Again, I think if you have a Wits, he's the perfect handcuff that you can sort of look to pick and choose, because he's probably really only going to play when Wits is out of the side, and his ability to be able to score what I would call a reasonable score through that area as well. I mean, the Gold Coast, they really only have 3 ruck options, with Wits and Noble being the third outside, obviously Moyle. It feels, if you are trying to get Moyle with the hope that Wits has only got maybe 1, maximum of 2 years left, if you're getting him, I think looking at your community ranks, I think he's in about the 170 sort of area at the moment. So you're getting huge amounts of value for him, and it's just a matter of being able to pick the timings for him and work out how you're going to be able to take him to keep him for that 1 extra year.
I think they do have Ethan Reid that was touted as a ruck and underage, but he looks more like he's going to be a key forward, I think, now than actually be a ruck, which is disappointing because his underage numbers were really good. But I'm with you. I don't really see how he actually bumps up to be a ruckman in that side.
He's also not. I'm not sure if is he a ruck in fantasy?
I think he's be only a forward, because I don't really think he took that many rucks. Last year. But no, I do. My thinking is more like, even if you're not a Wits owner, if you're someone who needs a ruck and you've got a year, like you've got like an Oscar McInerney or someone who's in the twilight, you can rely on for another year, he's still someone you should be targeting, because I think the kind of number 1 role for him is only a year or 2 away. I think Wits is probably 1 big injury away from probably giving it away, and I think it might come sooner rather than later for the big fella. So I reckon Moyle is just probably someone, if you could stash for a year, maybe 2 at the most, I think, but he could be a reasonable scorer for your side if you can pick him up. The other breakout contender for this season, there's a couple more, one more we'll talk about after this, but Toby Conway is the name on a lot of people's lips, and he was last year as well, but I think he is Geelong's preferred ruckman. It's just that we've seen a few injuries and things in the last couple of seasons kind of get in his way. But he averaged 75 points per game when he did play in 2024. And he had a top score of 94 against the Gold Coast as well. So, he's proven that he can actually put up some decent numbers there. Do you think he'll be the number 1 ruck if he can stay fit?
I think poor old Reece Stanley, he must be close to be on his last legs. For me, Geelong are just the toughest team to focus on from the ruck position. They've never really had anyone that's super fantasy relevant, and their game style doesn't really allow that, and sort of mirrors the fact that they don't have a fantasy relevant ruckman. I think the beauty of Toby, he's going to be going really cheap. As you said, Stanley's really on that last legs, and I think if you are correct in picking him at this time, I think that you're going to get some. You're going to really pick up a guy that, to say that his value is understated is a real understatement.
Yeah, I agree. I think like there's no other real candidate in that side. Like people are talking about Sam de Koning, like maybe potentially being the ruck, but we saw how badly they got smashed when he was in there. Yes, he scored well, but I think they'd prefer to have him in defence. Like I just don't see any other option. It's just going to hinge on whether Conway can stay fit, I think. And if he stays fit, he's going to be a pretty viable option for a long time to come for your keeper league teams. Last one's a bit of an interesting one. Nick Bryan, I think he might take over as the main ruck at Essendon 2025. The only issue is I don't see a world where Essendon don't play 2 rucks. Sam Draper's got the skill set where he can go forward. So I think they might use Bryan as like the main ruckman and then rotate Draper between forward and ruck. But like Draper's injury history and fluctuating form, like could see Bryan actually become Essendon style ruck just at stages throughout the season. Like if there's an injury or something like that, we might see him pop up. But like I don't think Essendon's ever going to go back to using Todd Goldstein or anything like that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? He averaged 71 AFL fantasy points in 2024, top score of 80. Do you reckon he's worth keeping an eye on?
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that the Bombers are a little bit more predictable when it comes to their gameplay, they're more likely to have a ruckman that is serviceable. The problem is they've just got so many more options that they can run through that area at the moment as well. If they tend to go down the area of at least prioritising one, still play with 2, but prioritising one, Bryan could be that player that really jumps up in that score and gives a bit of value back as well. But I don't know about you, it feels like the Bombers just have such a large range of possibilities what they could do. They're just as likely to ruck Parish or something like that out of the middle of nowhere. So just they're crazy to watch. So, but yeah, I do like Bryan. I do think he's going to be able to be at that back end and give some value back that way.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one too. Yeah, I think Nick Bryan's probably in for a good career at Essendon. It's just hopefully it can be a fantasy scoring one. They also picked up another ruck in the draft, but we'll talk about him a bit later because he does come into the rookie kind of category here. Onto the undervalued players. Now, Sean Darcy, and I think since making this show doc, I think he's been sent overseas for something or other to Doha or something. But he averaged 80 last season, under 80 last season, averaged 77, which makes him back to the podcast status. We know he's an elite ruckman if he can stay fit. And apparently, I haven't seen the images, but I was on the Supercoach podcast the other week and they were talking about how slim he was in the off-season. He's lost a bit of weight or something like that. So maybe that's to do with, helping his legs probably, not get so injured or whatever. But what are your thoughts on Sean Darcy?
It could be a really undervalued player. I think he's in that sort of maybe second to third tier of ruckman that is going to get the number one role at his club. The fact I'm surprised he only averaged 77 last year. Felt like it didn't feel that low. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think last week the alarm bells started ringing again for him as they sent him to Doha for surgery on that left knee or rehabilitation. It feels like you're trying to get some more extra value out of him, and he is one of those more riskier picks. If it was up to me, I'd prefer someone else to just have to deal with him. It's not one of those players who's probably on my radar unless you have a who's the other guy that plays the ruckman that plays with
Luke Jackson.
Luke Jackson is the name. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just on Luke Jackson, I was going to go on a tangent there anyway. At the end of last season, when we saw Darcy injured, like for the 15th time or whatever, they didn't actually play Jackson in the ruck. They moved to Liam Reedy, which was a pretty interesting strategy. Well, or just an interesting thing to think about because, does that mean Luke Jackson's days as everyone's hoping will become a ruckman are over if Freo are already kind of opting to go with a different main ruckman and keep him forward? What do you think?
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys. I think he's going to give more value as a forward to Fremantle themselves.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the Jackson owners should be a little bit concerned of him ever becoming like that, 100+ guy as a ruckman. He might just be capped as a 70 to 80 guy as a key forward with a few extra hit-outs thrown in, don't you think?
Exactly, yeah. And if that's what you want out of a forward, I think then that's awesome.
That's
just
fine.
Never going to be that 90+ ruckman.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, we talked about Sam Draper before. Is he undervalued in any way? Because I think he only averaged in the 60s last season. What do you think?
The Bombers are just too hard to pick from. I think the thing that might be going for Sam is the fact that it's that famous contract year. As other clubs look to sort of circle him, I think the whispers are that the Crows are right into him, trying to bring him back to South Australia. I couldn't almost think of anything worse as a Crow supporter to try and pick up this guy as a ruckman. But yeah,
don't have a lot of options though, mate.
Yeah, well, we got Strawny. We'll just keep playing Strawny in the twos until he eventually takes over from Rob and his lying on ground stats.
You know they're the same age, right?
Yeah,
so when one retires, they'll probably go together.
No, yeah, well, that's all. Yeah, we're in trouble. Okay. Free agency, baby. Free agency.
We might talk about, we got a question later on about Strawny, so we might leave it for that. The other one is Matt Flynn. I think you've added this one to the show doc here now. I think he's injured at the moment, but what are your thoughts there?
I think if you're talking about value, this is the guy that's set to take over the number one position in a more lowly team. Not quite as good as, I'm not trying to make out that he is the next cherry, but if the West Coast are going to play anything similar to what North Melbourne did, which is at the Ruck contest, hit the ball to the contest, and the ability for him to lay a tackle or two. So his score last year of 61, I think he was set to come in and be the number one ruckman last year. Got obviously injured and only played 4 games with an average of 61. Feels like he's continually been struck down by injury, but if he can get his body right, I think the West Coast Eagles ruck department will be taken by storm by him. It does feel, I know this might come as a shock and horror to your Heff, that it does sound like he has gone down with an ankle injury during the preseason already, so it feels like throw all that out again. No, but I still feel like if you're getting him super late in the ruck run, I think there's some huge advantages to being able to take him. Do you think I'm on the right track, or what are your thoughts?
I don't love that one as much, just because I think Bailey Williams was like entirely serviceable last season. Like he averaged 75 for the year. He showed some signs the year before that. I don't know if he kind of took off as much as we maybe thought he was, because at the start of last year we were thinking like, why is Flynn going to West Coast when Bailey Williams is just starting to kind of break out and do his thing as well. So unless I hear something really solid from McQualter saying that we plan on using Flynn as our number one ruckman, I'm staying away, because I reckon Bailey Williams is just every chance of keeping the mantle there as well. I know there are a lot of people that are keen on him, and I sometimes think maybe I've missed an interview or something like that I haven't heard. But it's not the first time I've heard Flynn thrown up this offseason. I think some reason he got up really high on the community draft rankings as well. So I figured I must have missed something there, but I just don't have any confidence that he is the guy. And then you've got Harry Barnett as well, like the underage gun, who's probably going to take till he's about 25, and he's about 21 now. Long term, thinking like, are they just biding their time until, and just trying to find someone to kind of fill the spot until he's ready to take over? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it could also go down the track of they play both of them. They play Williams and they play Flynn, and they don't look to prioritise. My gut feel is if he's fit, Flynn is the number one, and they probably try and use Williams in a bit more of other type of capacity, whether it's up forward and a bit of a chop out. I do like Harry Barnett. He's just going to take a long time. He's super skinny framed to be able to build out, and I think, again, as we talked about, the ruck rule changing, those big skinny ruckmen have less and less effect with these rule changes as well.
No, 100% agree. He will take, I've got him here on the stash options because I do think he's going to take another year or two before he actually gets a game. When everyone was injured, he was the only one not getting a game. Really, they weren't even willing to throw him in then. So, yeah, he's going to take a little bit of time. Onto the stash options next. Dante Vicentini is the next one. He actually got mentioned in the interview with Jordon Sweet as he's just a good player to work with in the ruck. So he showed some signs there. I think Jordon Sweet is going to be our number one ruck for a fair while to come. But it's more so that there were. And I think the Soldo did have some injury problems, but there was a time where they could have played Soldo because Sweet was out, and they played Vicentini instead. And I think he had one good game. I think it was maybe against Geelong as well. Can't remember. But I think long term he could be someone, or if he gets traded, could be an option. So someone to stash. Do you know much about Vicentini?
Not really, other than he played his first game. He was a real late call up from memory. So, but yeah, not heaps. I think he was maybe a darling of the classic world, just simply because he was at ultra bottom price and people sort of picked him up for those 3 games. The fact that he might be ahead of Soldo, I mean, it really sort of goes to show where Soldo has sort of fallen to as well. But
yeah, I think it's more so. I think it's just more so a good sign for his development that if he has moved ahead of Soldo, then but still a long way off being number one ruck and overtaking someone like Jordon Sweet anyway. The other one we've kind of already mentioned, the other two, Liam Reedy. I just think it's promising that he was actually used over playing Jackson as the number one ruck last season, and Harry Barnett we've already mentioned. He'll take another year or two at least before he's kind of got the body to play at senior level, but he's shown he's a fantasy star at the underage level, just given his athleticism, the way he can kind of just take marks and almost hangers around the ground and stuff like that. He's just got to be able to replicate that at AFL level. We'll move on to the senior players next. When the significance of the senior players are always, if you're contending, you want them because they'll help you win a flag. But if you're not contending, you're going to want to trade them off to get the maximum value for them in the draft, as in draft picks before they do retire. And the only one really I've got on the list here, the only other one that was really that odd was Todd Goldstein, but I don't think he's worth mentioning. The only one I got here is Max Gawn. Obviously still an elite player in AFL fantasy. What's your gut feel this season? Do you think he holds his kind of fantasy average, or do we think we start to see a decline this year?
I think his average will probably hold. You get the talking to our resident Melbourne expert over a few beers and possibly a espresso martini as well. He seems to be of the thought that Max might only play 16, 17 games this year. He thinks he'll probably play a lot. He'll play the full of those games, and by that I mean I don't think he'll be subbed a lot, but he'll probably look to be rested in for a week on and week off here. So I think that does feel like that's a bit of a flag, but with Tom Campbell just waiting in the wings as the only other ruckman that has any AFL experience. It feels like Melbourne will still need him to put a high level of output for them to be successful. So if you do have him and you're contending, I think he's the perfect guy you need. If not, you'd probably look to push him on to find some other value. But if you do have him, you are going to need to probably look to the draft to find that Tom Campbell just sitting there waiting for a handcuff.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to need Tom Campbell. I think he's already done something to his voice box or larynx or something already this preseason.
Smack in the throat, yeah.
Yeah, but that's probably more unlucky than a soft tissue injury or anything like that. But yeah, definitely going to need Tom Campbell as that handcuff. I think a lot of it depends on how Melbourne are going. If they're right up there in the mix, you'll get Max Gawn every week, no problems. If they're kind of the same way as they were last year, they might rest him a bit more and just try to get him through and try to fast track that rebuild. But we might be seeing the decline of the Melbourne dominance, if you can call it that, since they won the grand final, and might be slipping back a little bit as well, which might mean Gawn might be finished. The hard thing with a ruck like Max Gawn, like if you're not like most of the contending teams are contending teams because they have a primo ruck option. Like they've got the Marshall, they've got the Gawn, they've got a Cherry. They've got those kind of guys. Most of them are Tim English. They're generally up there, so it makes it so hard to actually trade them to a top option if you're one of those bottom sides, because you can only field one in most leagues. It does make the case for the utility spot a bit in that, which you can bring back in the keeper platform. But then you've got the issue of people hoarding rucks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that in terms of strategy?
When it comes to hoarding rucks, I mean, do people hoard mids? Do they hoard defenders? No, that people see value in players and they look to keep them over others. And if you roll the dice and try and keep an extra ruck, I think that's just good team management.
I don't mind that.
I like there's been. Looking at our draft last year, and we kept 12 players. I think it was off the top of my head. There were two teams that didn't keep a ruck at all. So, like you see, the chasm between the very top rucks and what Connors was probably going to be there was so big that it was better to try and hoard another midfielder rather than worry about a ruckman sort of thing. So I know we didn't have utility, and if we did, that would probably change those requirements up to try and keep those ruckmen. But it does give another sort of level of play in trying to work out where you see the value as well.
No, you are right. In my head, I'm like, everyone's going to try to field two rucks, and there's not 24 rucks in a playing each week type thing, so it's not going to work. But then you're right, you don't have to play a ruck in your utility spot, do you? You could play someone else. So,
we're changing our rules, Heff. We're going back to utility then.
I think it's a bit late now, but we might.
I don't think it is. We haven't done the draft yet, mate. There's plenty of time. Yeah,
I'll have a think about it. But anyways, I've only got one rookie on the list before we get into the listener questions. And the rookie I've got here is Cale Guerin. He averaged 109 playing in the Waffle Colts, and he's a pretty versatile ruckman. But the issue is he plays as a key forward pretty well also, and he's going to a club that already have two rucks on the younger side, and they're probably lacking that taller forward option. So I see him kind of maybe as like a Luke Jackson type deal where he's probably more likely to play as a key forward than a ruck. But if he does end up as a ruck, he could be a good option. Do you know much about the rookie, Zanks, or happy to move on?
Not much about him, but I think you said it best before. If this guy's 23, 24, then that's when you're probably looking to rookie those types of players, or to pick them up super late where there's that period of growth. But if they're 18, 19, I don't think there's too many players that are going to come in and be worth keeping for that longer term anyway.
No, agree. All right, we'll move on to the listener questions to finish off the show. At Vulcan Left Hand asks, would like some advice. Currently, I have an aging primo ruckman with no real backup. I would love some of your takes on rucks that I could draft in 2025 that could emerge in succession plans for aging ruckman in the league. He's thinking Richmond, Melbourne, Gold Coast Suns, and Sydney. What are your thoughts here? Anyone come to mind for you?
Not really. I think probably the biggest call out depends on the setup of your league and how many teams and things like utility. I think the challenge is if you have 12 teams, no utility, then being able to pick up a serviceable ruckman at the end of the ruck run who's ranked 10, 12th, 14th in his line sort of thing really gives you a bit of flexibility. But as soon as you start throwing in utilities, there might be a few more taken that area. So is there anyone that sort of came to mind on your side that you would maybe flag to help with this one?
Well, looking at like the clubs here is listed: Richmond, Melbourne, Gold Coast, Sun Sydney. Like Richmond, I look at half their players in their best 22 and don't know who they are, let alone half the guys running around in the VFL. So I can't really help you with them. The only one that really stands out, like we've already mentioned it, but Gold Coast Suns, Ned Moyle. I would go early on him if you've got that aging primo that's going to get you through this year, then maybe try to snatch him from the guy who owns Wits before he can get his handcuff in, because that could be a good option. Like I think Grundy's still probably got a year or two at Sydney, but you could look at Peter Laddams. He looks like the one that's kind of in line. I think they delisted that other backup ruckman that they were using at the start of last year as well. So but if you think about Richmond, there's no one really on their list coming through that I'm really aware of. Melbourne have got no one coming through, so look at maybe Moyle or Laddams. But then if that's the case, then just kind of try to pick up one of the lesser rucks that are in the pool. I'm just trying to think, like maybe someone like Jordon Sweet is available. That might be pretty decent for you, because he's kind of around that ranked top 10, ranked top 12 kind of range. If you're playing 12 teams, it's not a bad idea. Nick Bryan could be someone you could go after as well, or Toby Conway, as we mentioned. But apart from that, it starts to kind of fade away a little bit. At AFL break even, wants to know, does SDK count as an emerging ruck? Kind of touched on that before. Do you see De Koning rucking at all this season?
Nah, they'll go back to using him in defence. I think there's a couple of times where they were sort of pushed to find a solution for that equation, but I feel like he's too important down back for them, especially as they look to shore up the defence.
Yeah, I think the only way it might happen is if there's an abundance of injury, like Conway gets injured and they really need to use someone like Blitzarves in another position or something like that. Then maybe they might throw him in there for a game and he'll have a good score, but it's definitely not something I'd want to be relying on. At Ruxon S, this is probably a good one for you, given you're a Crow supporter, and it doesn't mention one that I'd like to know more about. At Ruxon S, neither Riley Thilthorpe or Ethan Reid have ruck status, but both have the capacity to spend time in the ruck. Reid, I don't know what sure that means. Can you see either playing more ruck minutes in 2025 and beyond?
I can see Thilthorpe playing a bit of a chop out, but I think he's just, when he was up forward for the Crows, I know there was a lot of injury last year for him. He's one of those dynamic forwards that attract all of the defence to him, and it makes our forward line look so much more spacious when he's up there. He can take that big pack mark when we consistently just, almost Port Adelaide like, just kick it into the forward line, just really hoping for just bombing it in there. But I would love to see him in the ruck, other than the fact of how much weight he put on and muscle over the last sort of 2 years and really become sort of beast mode. Maybe that might help him in the ruck. But if he was to play that position, I feel like he could really tear it up. But I think the Crows will use him more exclusively in the forward line, simply because of the value that he adds down there.
I think I've been the biggest advocate for Thilthorpe going into the ruck one day over the last 2 years. I'm saying it's going to happen one day. I've given up. Just look at the way he came back last year, how huge he was. And it looks like they've just made him into your main key forward for life after Tex type thing. So I don't think that's going to be happening anymore. So, yeah, unfortunately for the owners there. But every chance to pinch hit. But I always find the pinch hitting in the ruck doesn't actually – I always have a theory, I guess, that it doesn't actually help them, because the extra hit outs they get from going on the ruck could be worth a goal up forward if they stayed up there as well. So it tends to even out a little bit. And the last one's another Crows player, is from Michael Bellardi. He wants to know, does Strawn take over Rob this season?
It is the perfect version of that handcuff where you've got one, you're going to get the other. So they're almost an exact swap for each other. When one's scoring okay, goes out injured, the other one comes in and scores almost exactly the same sort of thing. So it's the perfect sort of handcuff. It's one I've gone with many, many times in my other league, except for 1 year when one of my other fellow coaches just decided to take him just out of spite and as trade value. But that was fortunately the year he sat on the bench the entire year, so that was okay. I don't think there's going to be. I don't think he takes over. I think they also probably don't job share. I don't think that worked too well last year either.
Yeah, I think they've already experimented with it. They tried it and it didn't quite work. So unless something has really changed over the off-season and Strawn has somehow just overtaken him, from all the footage and stuff I've seen at the Crows, it doesn't look like that's the case. So yeah, like, he's probably a good troll pick for the person who does own Rob, if you want to take him before he does and then offer him up as for trade and stuff like that to try to get him, and you might get something more than what he's worth than you would in a draft. You could do that, but I wouldn't be expecting him to overtake Rob in any way, shape or form this season. Anyways, that brings us to the end of the episode. Zanks, you want to plug anything? You want to give him your Twitter, your X, whatever it's called, for people to follow you?
No. We'll just keeping on, and just, I think what do you got going at the moment? You got you get any updates to the website coming along?
Yeah, the Supercoach spreadsheet will be coming out in the next probably 24 hours, I would say. So that'll be up pretty soon. I've also got I'm trying to get the Supercoach version of the mock draft simulator coming out as well, so Supercoach users can kind of practice theirs with their keepers and stuff like that. So yeah, just got to find the time. My son goes back to school tomorrow, so hopefully I will find the time to actually do that.
You got rankings across positions coming out soon, or any updates?
Usually the rankings would be out by now. We used to rank them by lines, defenders, mids, rucks, forwards, and release them over a 4-week period. I'm kind of holding off a little bit. I'm going to do, instead of doing by position, I'm going to do a top 400 list. So that kind of covers most keeper league drafts that'll pick around the 40 players, 10 teams, that type of thing. And I'm going to do a contending ranks, so for teams that are contending, and ranks for teams that are rebuilding as well. So 2 sets of ranks coming out over the next 4 weeks. So stay tuned for those. I'm giving myself a little bit of extra time, considering we had a month worth of ranks last year anyway. So that's it. Thanks for joining us on the show this week. Get around us on all the socials at Keeper League Pod on all of those. Thank you, Zanks, very much for joining us on the show today. And make sure you get around the Keeper platform. Great supporters of this podcast. Anything else you want to add in, Zanks?
Nah, just really looking forward to seeing your ranks come out and being able to sort of pilfer for a few picks that you've obviously changed so that your home league can be pushed into taking players that you don't actually want.
See, this is why I can never win the league. All you guys know all my thoughts. It's the worst. But anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.